You're listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. Just a quick heads up before we get started with this episode, I wanted to let you know about a free resource for listeners of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. That means you. If you are planning your next trip abroad, or if you're just getting back out into the world again, maybe you're going to an event or to a festival or to a meetup, that you need to be prepared for what to say when you meet someone for the first time. Download our free Spanish conversation guide so that you'll be prepared to have a conversation with anyone that you meet for the first time in Spanish. We give you a list of the most common questions that you'll be asked and that you may want to ask someone when you meet them for the first time, along with the responses so that you can be prepared when you have that conversation in less than 30 minutes. So to get your free conversation guide, just go to SpanishConversationGuide.com. Simple, right? SpanishConversationGuide.com to download your quick guide to prep for your first Spanish conversation. Have you ever had a vacation that didn't go exactly as planned? If you love to travel, I'm sure you've had things go sideways at least once. And in this episode of the podcast, I'm going to share a story about how what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway ended up being an adventure in an entirely different country the very same weekend that I launched this podcast. Entonces, vamos a empezar. Let's get started.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast,
the show for Spanish learners
that love music,
travel, and culture.
Close your grammar textbooks,
shut down the language apps, and open your ears
how Spanish is spoken in the real world.
Let us show you
how to go from beginner
to bilingual.
Here's your host,
certified language coach,
Tamara Marie.
Hola y bienvenidos al episodio 229. Welcome to episode 229 of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. In this episode, I'm going to share another one of my loca historias de viaje, one of my crazy travel stories. And it's actually interesting because back in episode 25, this was a while ago, I actually shared a story about how I intended to visit Brazil and I ended up in Argentina. So if you want to check out episode 25, I actually did that episode in both English and Spanish. This one we're going to do a bit of a mix, so if you're a beginner you can still listen to the story. And also I did record some audio from my trip, so you're actually going to hear from native speakers from the countries I visited in this episode, and I'm going to break down everything that they say after. So I think you will really enjoy this regardless of your level. But I have a habit of going to one place or intending to go to one place and ending up in a different country. So I have talked about sort of in the intro of the podcast, and I'm sure you've heard other episodes if you're a long-time listener, about la primera vez que visité Panama. So the first time that I visited the country of Panama was really my first time outside of the country, and I got the motivation to really want to become fluent in Spanish from that trip because with my high school Spanish, it was really difficult for me to even get through customs and immigration in the airport because I didn't understand what they were saying. And so that was la primera vez, pero la segunda vez fue este viaje cuando yo fui a Panamá con una amiga mía para visitar un hotel, pero la verdad es que no había un hotel. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that trip. So this is mi segunda vez, my second time in el país de Panamá. And esta historia, este viaje, nunca debió pasar. It really should have never happened. But I'm so glad that it did, because even though it wasn't the trip I planned, it ended up being a very rewarding experience. So really, this episode really shouldn't have even happened. And the weekend that I launched this podcast, this was back in enero de 2019. So back in January 2019. When I launched the podcast, I had planned to be on a very relaxing, serene, yoga retreat in Panama. The whole weekend was supposed to be about tranquilidad, serenity, peace, because I was really looking to launch the podcast from a place of calm, right? And also being out of the country. And when I first found out about the retreat, a friend of mine said, listen, I'm going on this yoga retreat. I did check out the pictures online. It really did look like a beautiful resort. I mean, there was an infinity pool. It had 5-star reviews. It really looks like el escape perfecto. So I really thought it was going to be the perfect getaway. But what we found when our Uber dropped us off was totalmente otra cosa. We arrived at the top of this remote mountain to find that the resort that we saw online with the infinity pool was really just a few slabs of concrete in a half-built building. Yes, this resort was very clearly still under construction. I mean, there was a common area, there was a kitchen, but there were no actual bedrooms. Well, at least not indoors. And most importantly, no había camas. That's right, we actually arrived before the beds did. And believe it or not, when we got there, the host really tried to convince us that everything was going to be fine. He had ordered some beds that later arrived in a pickup truck. And we were supposed to spend the night on top of this mountain with outdoor facilities, which, again, if I had planned on camping, it would have been fine. But that was not the plan. I had signed up for a relaxing weekend yoga retreat. So as you can imagine, that first night there was a very, very long night. Una noche muy larga. Había mucho viento y ruido, and I could actually hear coyotes howling in the distance. No me sentía segura, entonces tuve que escapar este escape perfecto. So I really was looking for a way out. And even though the host was determined to get us to stay, my friend wanted to stick it out. The other people on the retreat said this can be a spiritual, transformational journey. And I said I was not looking for that type of journey. I was looking for a building with 4 walls and a roof. So instead of trying to find a place in downtown Panama City, which some people had talked about, I had already been to Panama City. Because like I said before, I had already visited Panama. It was one of the first places I had been. I had already seen El Canal de Panama. I had had that experience. I just wanted to get out. And somewhere around midnight, I convinced the host to get me the password for the Wi-Fi so I could really figure out my escape plan. Now, it's ironic that with this one half of a building, there actually was Wi-Fi. It was a very poor signal, but it was enough so that I could book a trip. And I don't know what was a bigger indication that it was time to go, other than when I asked for the password to the Wi-Fi, I was told that the password was Get Wiggly. Yeah, it gave me vibes of like Will Smith getting jiggy with it, but get wiggly with it. I don't understand why that was the password. I would later find out that the host had a very intricate life philosophy that included life being about wiggliness. And at that point, I knew I had to go immediately. So first thing I could do in the morning was ask him to make sure I got an Uber so I could get out of there. And I wanted to be in an aeropuerto a primera hora. So that's what I did. And interesting enough, I was able to book a flight, but I didn't want to go back home. I had already planned to be on vacation, and it took a lot of coordination to do that at the time. So as I sat there in the dark, really trying to figure out what am I going to do next, this one line from Una Canción de Salsa just popped into my head. And it was from a song called La Rebelión by Joe Arroyo, which I believe I've covered on the podcast before. And I will link in the show notes, learnspanishconsalsa.com/229, if you want to get a link to that episode where I break down that song. But Joe Arroyo, he actually came out with this song. It tells a really powerful story about the history of a certain region in Colombia. And the line that kind of stuck in my head was when he said, Las calles de Cartagena. And I was like, Cartagena, okay, I'm in Panama. I think that's close to Colombia. Let me just see if I can find a flight. Can't be too expensive for a last minute flight. I'm almost there. And that's exactly what I did. Poco sabía yo, little did I know, the spur of the moment decision would land me in a city that I had never even heard of and lead me to discover one of the most fascinating cultures in Latin America, as well as one of the most fascinating languages that is actually a blend of Spanish and some other languages, right? But we will get to that later. Back to the mountain. So I booked the next flight from Panama City to Cartagena, sin hotel, sin plan, solo la letra de la canción en mi cabeza y la esperanza desesperada de dormir en una cama de verdad. I just wanted a real bed that was not on a mountain. So from the moment that I landed in Colombia, and this was my first time in that country, yo me sentía más en casa. You know, I landed and I just felt like I was at home. The immigration officer actually looked at me and said, "Pasa la línea de ciudadanos." And I was like, oh, I'm not a citizen. So I had to tell him, soy americana. So I definitely felt like it was a place where I would blend in. And I did happen to find a hotel that was chocolate themed. And if anyone knows me, they know me encanta chocolate. And it was literally right next door to a rum bar that had flights of rum paired with chocolate. Perfecto. De alguna manera, mi pesadilla de viaje se había convertido en un sueño. Somehow, I found the perfect place in a city that I had never been to before. And honestly, the next few days after that, it was just a blur. I mean, I planned a trip to visit a museum. I took a boat tour to an island. I wandered in the old city. And if you've ever been to Cartagena or any of the cities in the Caribbean, they're very, very beautiful. They all have the same sort of Spanish architecture. And I thought, not bad for a last minute episode. And that same weekend, I was on the balcony of the hotel and I recorded a video and turned on my camera and I announced that the very first episode of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast would be coming out that very week. Now, I have this little tradition when I travel. Cada vez que visito un país por primera vez, tengo que conseguir la bandera del país para llevarla como recuerdo. And in this case, when I was looking for my perfect souvenir, so I could have my Colombian flag to take home with me, I actually stumbled upon the statue of Joe Arroyo that was in the square. So literally, the man who had summoned me there with his song, I found when I was in Cartagena. Y tenía que tomarme una foto con él, porque él fue la razón que visité a Cartagena. And while I was wandering around, I also saw these women wearing traditional Colombian dresses. Llevaban faldas grandes y sueltas con el amarillo, azul y rojo de la bandera de Colombia. And they had these bowls of fruit on their heads. And literally it was like gravity did not exist. Yo empecé a charlar un poquito con una de las mujeres y me dio su información para mantenernos en contacto por WhatsApp. And at this point, like a true language nerd, como buena estudiante de los idiomas, estaba lista para practicar mi español. Entonces yo traté de hablar con la gente y aprender un poquito de la jerga, el idioma de Colombia. And on a tour with one of the locals is when I got my first opportunity to ask questions about how Spanish is different in Colombia versus other places. And it was really interesting. During this tour, I was actually taken to the home of the tour guide, and I started to notice the way people spoke. So I asked her about el acento de Cartagena, and this is what she said.
Una pregunta, ¿hay un acento de Cartagena que es diferente de otra parte de Colombia?
Claro, porque nosotros no pronunciamos las palabras completas. Por ejemplo, Cartagena. nosotros decimos Cartagena. Otra cosa, el bus. Nosotros le decimos el bus.
Entonces,
El bus,
corta la
el bus,
S en muchas palabras.
El bus. El autobús.
La R.
No, nosotros no decimos autobús. Eso es cachaco. Cachaco es no. Cachaco es la persona que nació en Bogotá.
Ok, entonces se corta la R y la S a veces en la palabra.
Sí.
Entonces, dame un ejemplo con una frase completa, normal y con acento cartagena.
Por ejemplo, nosotros y nosotros hablamos muy rápido. En la costa hablamos demasiado rápido.
Sí.
Entonces, nosotros estamos.
Ajá.
Nosotros no decimos estamos.
Sí.
Estamos. Estamos aquí comiendo carne. Pero en arroz,
Suena como la L.
sí, como una J, carne, estamos comiendo, estamos. Nosotros no decimos estamos.
Sí, estamos.
Estamos aquí comiendo carne y arroz. Y ahora voy a coger bus
Sí, ok.
a irme a trabajar. No
Entonces,
decimos,
corta la R y la S,
no decimos trabajar.
Sí, trabajar.
Ahora me voy a trabajar. Nosotros no decimos estoy lista para el baile o no decimos para él, decimos pal. Estoy lista para el baile.
Sí.
Okay, now so far this all sounded very familiar. I mean, I had been to Puerto Rico, República Dominicana, Cuba. Todos los países tienen acentos similares, parecidos, como muchos países en el Caribe. Pero cuando ella empezó a hablar sobre la diferencia entre las palabras que se usan en la costa y cómo se llaman el interior del país, o donde queda la ciudad de Bogotá, eso fue algo totalmente diferente. It never really amazes me at this point, anywhere I go, that people have their own culture, their own livelihood, their expressions, and words that you will never learn in a textbook. These are things you won't know unless you actually talk to people, which is why I love to travel and I love to have conversations, because to me, language is a living thing, and you really only learn the way people speak when you actually talk to them and you don't hide behind an app or your phone. So we started now to get into some of the words that you only hear in the Caribbean coast of Colombia. So as she explains in this next part of the conversation, there are phrases that are particular to Colombia, pero hay otras que solamente se usan en el español del costeño, ¿no? De la costa. So here we're talking about what are those words that are only used in Cartagena or in the more Caribbean parts of Colombia.
¿Cuáles son las palabras de Cartagena?
Ayúdame. Palabras que en Cartagena se dicen de una forma y en el resto de Colombia de otra. Por ejemplo, eso se llama bombillo. En otras ciudades.
She points to a light bulb.
Aquí se llama foco.
Poco.
Sí, se dice foco. Esto se llama tenedor.
We're all sitting at the dining room table and she holds up a fork.
Pero nosotros le decimos trinche.
Trinche.
El sparring es la persona que ayuda al conductor del bus a cobrar, a collect money. Pero solamente existe aquí arrutanado. Es una persona pobre, poor, arrutanado. Estoy arrutanado, pobre, no tengo plata. Camostre is an ugly person. Feo, in other parts of Colombia, feo. Here is camostre. Un camostre. Also, we have the catfish. In Spanish is bagre. Pero bagre también es una persona fea. Ok, yesquero, encendedor, the lighter. Nosotros le decimos yesquero. Mocho. We say short. Yes, short. Nosotros le decimos mocho. Nosotros un frasco, la botella de bottle, le decimos frasco. Un frasco. It has to be glass, like a glass.
Oh, okay.
Glass. Poco is poco, algo muy poquito, algo muy poco.
Ajá.
Pero aquí es también significa mucho.
Así.
Entonces, si tú dices, ¡qué poco!
Ajá.
Aquí significa mucho. Pero en Bogotá quiere decir que es muy poca comida.
Ah, sí.
Pero aquí significa que es mucho. Cógela suave. Take it easy. Cógela suave. Pero eso es de la costa caribe. Mamando gallo. Mamando is like a... When you, ¿qué es mamar? Como teniendo relaciones, ¿qué es?
No.
¿Qué es mamar?
Cuando el niño se...
Okay, when you feed,
está tomando el seno, está
mamando.
mamando, entonces aquí uno le dice, pues...
Mamar. Pero cuando tú estás molestando, like I'm making jokes, tú dices mamando gallo roster.
Ajá, rooster.
It's pretty weird.
Pero en inglés decimos en inglés pulling your leg. Eso no tiene sentido
Yes.
tampoco, pero
Yes.
es una expresión.
Es increíble la cantidad de palabras que soltó en un solo minuto. It was so amazing how many words she just rattled off in just a short time. So let's go over some of these phrases from Cartagena that she explained just in this short time. So we had foco en vez de bombilla for light bulb, trinche en vez de tenedor for fork, camostre, which is used for someone who is being feo, not attractive, arrogonado, which means to be poor or to be broke, bagre, which is another word for feo or ugly, but it also literally means catfish, which to me was pretty ironic because we had the show Catfish here in the US. I don't know if you're familiar. It's been ages now since the first episode came out, but it's all about someone pretending to be someone else online. So I'm kind of wondering, did someone come from Cartagena and come up with that show? We also had yesquero instead of encendedor for lighter, mocho instead of corto to mean short, frasco, which is used for a glass bottle, en vez de botella. And this is a really interesting one, poco, which can actually mean a lot depending on el contexto. And it's funny because it reminds me, like in English, I might say, oh, I'll just be a minute. It's never actually a minute. It's like a long time. So that's how I think of the way that they use poco. So these are the kinds of things that, again, you're not going to find if you don't actually talk to people. But they're essential for understanding everyday speech when you visit a city like Cartagena or other parts of the Caribbean in Colombia. You also have the city of Barranquilla. I believe there's the Isla de Santa Marta. So there's different places where you'll find this type of jerga or slang that's used. But she was really just getting warmed up. And at this point, she actually called in for reinforcements. So she had some friends and family there, and she asked them to jump in and share even more local phrases. So listen to this.
Apio de Jesús, ven acá. Enséñales a ellos palabras así bien locales.
Bien local.
Sí. A todos,
Vale.
mi vale. Yes, mi vale, like my partner. Tú eres mi vale.
Mi vale.
Mi vale. Pero un vale es como un pedazo de papel que que tiene un valor de dinero. Por ejemplo, tú tienes un vale por $10. Tú tienes un vale. Pero en la costa, mi vale es una persona que tú quieres mucho. Cuando tú dices, no, él es mi vale.
Así.
Pero es alguien muy importante. Es alguien así bien Pero
otra parte del Caribe le llaman mi pana. Es otra
pana,
parte del
como
Caribe.
mi pana.
Sí.
Pero mi vale, estos son como slangs en baja clase, baja social, low social class. Un beso. Aquí nosotros le decimos un entrompe. Pero ese es un beso ese es un muy romántico, muy. Sí, yes, entrompe.
El trompe también en otros lados lo pueden como trompada, ¿no?
Sí.
Ah, la trompada.
Entonces nosotros un golpe, le decimos una trompada. Trompada aquí, pero en el interior del país, eso puede ser porque trompa, ellos también le llaman la trompa, la boca. Entonces, aquí un entrompe es un beso, pero una trompada es un golpe. Otra cosa, nosotros le llamamos a los niños peladito.
Peladito.
Sí, peladito, pero eso solamente es en la costa. En el interior del país, ¿cómo le dicen? Chino, like a Chinese. Todos los niños son chinos. Chinito, un chino. Pero it's not a Chinese, no. Just a child.
Sí.
Nosotros le llamamos peladito.
Peladito.
Like a peladito is something that que no tiene piel, like it's on peel. No peel, that is something pelado. We call it peladito. Pero hay otros sitios donde le llaman guambito. En Boyacá, le dicen guambito.
Did you catch all those? I know it's a lot, right? But this was the one that surprised me the most. You have to be really careful, apparently, when you're ordering breakfast in Colombia, because someone might think that you're trying to get something else entirely.
Ok, el perico. Perico tiene diferentes significados. Perico is an animal, is a bird, es un pájaro, pero tiene varios significados. Uno, tú puedes tener huevos pericos. Scrambled eggs is huevo perico.
Huevo perico en vez de revuelto.
Y también puedes decir huevo revuelto,
sí.
pero también está bien dicho huevo perico. También está bien dicho.
¿Solo en Cartagena o
Creo que en todos lados, huevo perico. Pero perico también significa cocaine. Tienes que decir huevos pericos, porque si no, pueden entender otra cosa. ¿Ok?
Sí, muy interesante.
La cerveza en otros lados es chela, ¿cierto? Chela. Una chela es una cerveza. Pero aquí nosotros también le decimos fría. Cold. Entonces, tú vas a una tienda y tú pides una fría. Eso es una cerveza. Like, give me a cold. Yes. A cold one.
Exactly.
Yes. Eso significa una cerveza. Pero tú también puedes decir, deme una fría, bien fría.
Una fría bien fría, sí.
¡Claro!
Eso tiene otra parte de...
¡Claro! Porque una fría puede estar caliente.
Sí, fue como ice cold beer. It's like ice cold.
Yes. Una fría helada. En el interior del país le dicen chela y pola.
Chela y pola.
Sí, give me a pola. Pola.
Now, did you catch that last word? Una fría, bien fría, a way to say ice cold beer. I don't know if you remember this, but back in episode 7 of our first season of the Dominican Spanish podcast, Kessia actually shared a very similar expression that they use in the Dominican Republic.
And then when you go to the colmado or a restaurant, you say, dame una fría. and they're gonna give you a beer. You say, give me a cold. I know it sounds weird, doesn't make sense, but whenever you ask for a fría, una fría, they're gonna come with a beer.
Just when I thought I had learned all of the new things I could about Colombia, about Cartagena, about El Caribe de Colombia, which honestly I didn't even think about South America having a Caribbean coast, then I learned about this place called Palenque. Just as we were visiting the market in Cartagena, made famous by Anthony Bourdain in his show No Reservations, I actually visited the cook that Anthony Bourdain visited in the show and had her prepare me a meal. And as we were doing that, the tour guide started to tell me all about the city, which I'll let her explain it.
Palenque tiene mucho de la cultura africana, y en el 2005 fue considerado a heritage site por la UNESCO, 2005. ¿Por qué? Porque en Palenque aún, currently, tú puedes encontrar tradiciones y costumbres de África que ya tú en África no las ves.
Y aquí es donde la historia se pone aún mejor. Just as I was getting ready to leave Colombia, I actually had an opportunity to visit the city of Palenque. And that is a story for our next episode. Como siempre, I hope that something that you heard in this episode will take you one step closer from Spanish beginner to bilingual. Hasta la próxima.
Thank you for listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast at learnspanishconsalsa.com.